Um, Great. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another session of B2B Marketing Shizzle. Every fortnight, we get together to discuss a B2B marketing topic. We get an expert, a guest expert, and then we record the session and share it with the wider group. Obviously, the benefit of people here is you can ask the questions and grill the guest. This fortnight, we've got Tim Limes, a good old friend of mine, and he's going to be talking about all things B2B PR. So Tim, over to you. If you want to share your screen there.
Is that right? I've got an error message. It's not a great start. Could you enable me to share my screen, and then I'll oh, here we go. There you go.
There you
Hey
go.
everyone, how you doing? Let me I prepared a little thing. As Ed says, we're old friends. Ed, you know me. If I go on too long, you're in charge of the gong. So gong me out and leave some time for questions. I guess I labeled this 5 secrets to PR. Unfortunately, now it's 4 secrets to PR because we need to fit within the time. But that's okay because they're all good. Let me start with a quick introduction. So I'm a director at Nelson Bostock. We're a top UK B2B tech agency. I've been here for many years actually, but and I've been in the sector for over 20 years. Trained in journalism, and throughout my career really focused on B2B and fast growth technology brands. Spent some time in-house at Canon, and as I say, really focused on tech. So maybe some of the examples will lean that way, but hopefully lots of the secrets, lots of the hints and tips and tricks will be broadly applicable. I'm going to start with a few truths. So just to set the scene for PR, obviously this is a broad group, and I don't want to assume people do this for a living and they might have some experience and might have no experience. I guess I want to tell you probably 4 things about PR. First of all, there are no guarantees when it comes to PR. So, and this will be obvious, but results are earned. They're not promised. They're not bought. They are earned, and that's a really important factor. And I think you know, important to set the scene for what I'm going to tell you. PR can't sell, certainly not directly. It supports, but it doesn't sell directly. It isn't instant. You can't just turn on PR and expect immediate results. I think it takes time to build brand reputation. I talk to brands, I talk to clients from an agency perspective, and the message is very much, you need to commit to PR. It's a process. You can't turn it on, turn it off, and deliver the same level of results. And lastly, it's important to say, evaluation continues to be, I think, a major issue, major challenge facing the industry. It's hard, it can be expensive, but it's something that all PRs are thinking about, just in terms of justifying, demonstrating value and justifying results in a world where ROI drives everything. So that's 4 quick things. We're going to get onto some secrets because we haven't got much time. Okay, first secret. Remember the human. Okay, and I think this relates really to what makes an interesting story. PRs will do lots of different things, but fundamentally the currency, the language that we talk is about stories. It's about storytelling. I think all too often, particularly in B2B, you know, the brands think about themselves first, think about you know, bits and bytes and nuts and bolts and products first. And I think we often, as consultants, need to drive the conversation away from the technology, in my world, and towards a story that surfaces the kind of the human element, the human impact of that story. And I think that's particularly the case for B2B. And you might say B2B brands, I'm selling to businesses. It doesn't really relate to my world. What I'm selling is this, but actually that sets the context. And I think that is really important to remember. I think if you look at stories, so this is just a couple of screen grabs from stories today from the BBC Tech, and also from Computer Weekly, and you'll see a lot of people, you'll see a lot of humans. From the BBC side, you can see technology being used to improve human lives. So someone with disability, you'll see a WhatsApp story, so a small product update, but the impact of that on people's lives is absolutely massive. So that's what makes it interesting, and maybe more of a more traditional B2B tech site and in Computer Weekly, but you'll see there in much the same way, the lead story is around I can't quite say it. Here we go. is around a change in technology, but fundamentally it's about people's lives. So in this case, developers, and how that change in technology will improve the way that developers develop software. Likewise, the post office, that's around a scandal, and with a huge human interest piece. And M&S, that's a very corporate story about profits, but actually it's framed. And the interesting thing is not necessarily just how the business is performing, but it's about the broader consumer buying habits. So all these things are really important, and hopefully you'll see that it's the human that makes those stories interesting. Here, I just wanted to show you. Often we talk about how we're gonna shape a story for a brand. And here, this is a simple model for storytelling, which in this instance shows on the left-hand side, you've got trade and vertical kind of media. So that type of story, which might be more focused on the business, on the strategy, on the technology. But on the right-hand side, if you want to tell that same story, it's not going to land with a national. And you need to broaden out that story and really dive into to surface the human interest and the economic impact of that. So you'll see, in different ways, different stories that you can tell. I knocked together a few headlines. I love a headline game, and these are different ways in which you could tell a story. And I guess this serves with PR. You can tell different stories in different ways. So Ed Davidson Marketing, congratulations! You've raised £20 million in new investment. That's fantastic. But
this is all true, all very true.
This is all true. We're breaking this news now. But I guess the point here is that top headline, whilst that's news, isn't that interesting. And actually, by drawing out additional context, so why you're doing it, Ed Davidson Marketing is going to revolutionize the way that small businesses, bounce back from the difficult times and grow, or it's about creating jobs, or it could be about transformation in a certain vertical sector. Lots of different ways to kind of unpack but surface human interest stories. So congratulations, Ed. So I think all that is really important. We're going to talk a bit more about people in a bit, but as you see, the kind of human story, the kind of top takeaway I always take from talking to B2B brands is, think about the human. Number two, understand the media. Now, PR is a lot of things to a lot, and we do a lot of things for different brands. And PR is not media relations, but it's a really important part. So it's, as I say, it's earned. And I think if you can understand the media, then you will understand a little bit better about how to reach and how to engage your audience. Understanding that media helps you to understand both the market, your competitors, the wider macro trends, which really influence on your business. And I think as a PR, you can look to your PR team to be that almost window to the outside world. They can kind of give you, they can critically assess and give you kind of wider context. Often we talk to brands and they're like, we got this story, it's or a piece of news or a new product update. It's amazing, and it's the job of the kind of comms team to say, is it so interesting, and what impact is it going to have? And hopefully, I've got some nods, but hopefully that is a familiar story. So really, just really quickly, media landscape. There's a lot to unpack here, but just from a media perspective, the landscape is changing all the time. The ratio of journalists to PRs is changing. The media, there are fewer and fewer journalists and more PRs, which means that the job of a PR from a media relations perspective is getting harder. At the same time, journalists are under way more pressure than ever before. They need to file more stories across print and online potentially, and they're really commercially driven. So they need to deliver traffic and eyeballs and show impact in that sense. They're going to be drawn towards the stories and the topics and the issues that drive greater visibility. And all that, I think, is really important to understand, as well as some of the digital social changes, the rise of TikTok, all that kind of stuff. AI is coming. It's going to take all our jobs. Aren't we all worried about that? And from a media perspective as well, can AI write news in the same way? Can it, in what way is it going to disrupt journalism, for instance? Loads of stuff going on there, and loads we can unpack. Again, I'm the king of Venn diagrams, so sorry for this, but you, from a brand perspective, finding your story is really, really important. And I think by understanding both the media and your customer, you find that area of overlap. Not everything you're going to want to talk about or your client's going to want to talk about is going to be particularly interesting or newsworthy. But if you can find that crossover, that the kind of your boom zone, the area which really does resonate with both the media and customers, then you're finding and surfacing the right stories and telling them in the right way. I think there's also a point here around the benefit of consuming in the media. I think I started off and I found a love for what I do because I love reading newspapers, and that's still with me today. But now it's kind of transitioned into podcasts. I'm an absolute obsessive. I love podcasts, but just by consuming media more broadly, do you understand the kind of wider world around you, and you kind of break out of that bubble? I think it's really, really important. Lesson number 3. So use your people power. And I think I haven't got a Venn diagram for this. I haven't got. This is simply to say, I guess, from a B2B brand perspective, one of the most powerful tools you can use is to identify people to tell your story in different ways. And whether that's through profiling or through thought leadership, I think that's really important. Why? Because, at the end of the day, while we're talking B2B, people buy from people. There's a broad and growing lack of trust in brands. And I think certainly from a media perspective, they want to hear from people. They, care less about kind of faceless brands. And I think by surfacing individuals within the organization, you kind of broaden and add color to what would otherwise be quite quite difficult to engage with organization, I guess. So I guess the advice here is build thought leaders within your organization. Don't be afraid to kind of raise people's profile within the organization, and it is such a powerful weapon in B2B PR. So really important. And number 4, I think that you would hope that all brands and businesses are honest. It seems like an obvious statement to make. I think honesty and authenticity are more valued now than perhaps they ever have been. I think it's important to say PR can do many things. You can present the best version of yourself, and like I showed you in the Ed Davidson marketing headline game, you will see that you can kind of present and tell a story in different ways, but fundamentally it can't make you something you are not. And I think by being honest, it's the best way to build connection, relationships, and ultimately trust with your audience. So I guess more generally, we are in an era of massive transparency. I think if a brand or a leader is seen to be evasive or disingenuous, people will abandon you. There is certainly a new generation of B2B buyers who expect brands to be really open about their values, expect there to be a brand commitment to a cause, expect brands to be talking about things that matter, and expect brands to not just make money, but make the world a better place. And I think all that is really important to remember. And I think honesty, another point I was wanting to make around honesty is particularly around when it's all well and good when the going is good. When there is a crisis, when an issue hits, I think it's really important to remember that lesson. I think we have seen in the last few years how internal comms are essentially external comms. People share, people snip, you send an email or you handle a situation badly within a large organization, that can be very quickly shared out of that organization. We've all seen those kind of really cringe-worthy moments where people are made redundant on Zoom and really badly handled kind of employee relations. I think that's really important to remember. So when there's a broader crisis for your organization, there's been an outage, you've been hacked, there's an issue, how do you handle it? And I think even when it's hard, being honest is the best approach. So honest with what the issue is, what the risk is to your customers, how you're responding, what are you learning from that experience, and what you're going to do differently. All those things are really important. And I think I've seen, without naming names, brands who haven't kind of told the whole story, and then there's news cycles and moments which kind of continue to damage the brand. Whereas if it had been kind of if the issue had been fronted, embraced fully from the start, that can be a much stronger way to manage that situation. You're taking control of the situation, you're starting to tell your story. I think that's really important. So 4 lessons and a couple of questions to leave you on. And I guess, we all really focus on our worlds and on our roles within an organization, within an agency. I think it's always really valuable to ask brands, and potentially lots of our conversations start from, and we always try and tell them something they don't know around, how they are perceived, or opportunities opportunities to grow or gaps in their reputation. So understanding how well you understand the reputation is really, really key. As well as a kind of a classic, this is very PR, but what do you want to be famous for? This is all about fame. It's about kind of driving and telling certain stories. I think only by having that vision enables you to kind of deliver programs and activity that support that and reach for that goal. So while it's a big question, it really helps drive programs. So that's me. It's been
Perfect.
lovely to talk to you. How did I do on time, Ed?
Perfect timing.
Oh,
And I've got 7 minutes to grill you some wonderful questions.
that's absolutely dreamy.
And it's amazing. Yeah, it's really interesting to see that, promotion of Ed Davidson marketing, but how you can portray it in different ways and how you can have, something which is just purely factual and then take it that makes it more personable and more human and therefore presumably more likely to be picked up and engaged with. In terms of like digital PR versus traditional PR, do you think there's more of a bleed into more digital PR, and does that mean kind of link building to help complement SEO and more of a focus there, or is it still important from a B2B perspective to be classic column inches and kind of mentions?
It's a great question, and something that I because I've been doing this 20 years. I'm the old school and I'm the traditional, and I think there are briefs and brands, and there's a whole breed of PRs that are focused entirely on digital and on delivering impact digitally. And I think in some ways that goes back to my evaluation point. That's much easier to kind of to see the value and improve the impact because of the traffic or the SEO or the link building. And as you say, it's almost a subset of what of my world, and actually, being honest, not an area of expertise for me in particular, but it is really important, and kind of driving, from a pure play editorial perspective. Occasionally you'll get a link. If you ask a journalist to drop a link in, I think they can do it, but it's also frowned upon, just from a kind of professional respect. You're writing a story, they're not there to improve your SEO, but there's enormous value to that, right? And that's, with the rise of digital, with the rise, the changes we've seen, that's only going to increase. So it's a good question. I'm not sure I've answered it, but
yeah, I think there's still definitely value in terms of how things are mentioned, and I think it is harder to get links in that way. But I think that with the changes to Google and the fact that you're kind of seeing those kind of snippets, and even kind of the AI responses as well, the things that will be picked up, the level of authority that those links can provide, especially if it's around a particular topic, then can make a massive difference. This is a follow-up to that then, do you think that is, from a B2B PR perspective, it's harder or easier than B2C? Is it that the topics are drier, or is it there more opportunity to make them more human?
Well, there's depends where you come from. My background is overwhelmingly B2B, and you would if you talk to a B2C PR, you would get a different answer. They would view B2B as kind of being stuffy and boring and corporate maybe, and not creative is the big one, right? It's like, how can you be creative? You're not floating things down the Thames and doing kind of crazy stunts. But I think you have to work a bit harder. You have to be more creative to kind of build some of these stories sometimes. And that is really, really important. I think fundamentally, you're applying the same skills, whether you're talking media relations or social or events or analyst relations, like that, influence engagement, whatever you're talking about, you're still fundamentally, and this is why I led on the story piece, you're still engaging with stories. And I think by doing that and doing that well, from a B2B perspective, you can earn and massively inflate and build reputation, and that's really important.
Yeah, makes sense. There also, the fact that, as you mentioned about, journalists, journalists in journalists is such a tough gig to be there, and then you're having a whole load of redundancies, and a lot of it is either tied to subscriptions or it's kind of very much kind of clickbait activity.
Yeah.
Does that, you said that was kind of more challenging. Do you have to take kind of different angles, or is it literally a little black book of journalists where you have the kind of right fit with the right, I suppose, kind of B2B titles where it kind of works best?
Well, when I got 20 years ago, it was all about relationships, right? But that was more about who you went for lunch with, or who you took out and got pissed. Now it still is genuinely about relationships, in the sense that relationships built on respect and built on the ability to give them what they want and present a story in the right way. I think back in the day you would spray out news to 100 different journalists without much thought, and some of them would pick it up and then you'd move on. Whereas it's a bit like ABM, right? It's much more one-to-one. It's much more bespoke. It's much more personal. You need to work a lot harder. And I think that fundamentally is a truth to, engaging and building those long-term relationships. But that's not to say you can't pitch a story to someone you don't know if it's formed in the right way. And I think that's really important as well. So
I think that's really interesting, though, the crossover with ABM, though, the fact that in the same way you're targeting a company from different angles, you have that, you're going after a particular journalist and a particular title, you're producing content for that person to be able to get the story. So yeah.
And if you think about it, it's still a sell. I'm trying to sell a story. I'm trying to sell a spokesperson or a particular point of view. It's still that kind of engagement. So I think there's a lot PRs can learn from ABM, and from the kind of broader marketing world. So
cool. Last question, because nearly at time. I really try and keep these snappy into time. You mentioned AI, and obviously everyone is talking about AI. Have you seen any benefit so far in terms of ChatGPT or Bard or anything in the way that you're doing PR? I imagine you can ask it to write a press release. I'm sure it's incredibly bad, but
well, the answer is we're playing with it, and like everyone, right? We're trying to see where it can quickly, from transcribing calls to, like, you can see at the very base level, at the very bottom of the triangle, the kind of all the admin and automation, getting content together would make sense. I think there's a long way to go, and we're still very much playing. We've got creatives playing with it, in terms of kind of building out a kind of creative response to kind of clear client briefs, but it's early days, but yeah, I don't think there's a kind of immediate fear it's taking our jobs, but I think there's huge efficiencies and opportunities if we can approach it in the right way. So
sounds good. Right, better stop. Tim, massively appreciate it. Thanks to the guys that have joined. Obviously, I'll share it with the wider group tomorrow morning. Thanks again.
Thank you, Ed.
Cheers.
Thanks,
now.
Tim. That's great. Thank you.
Cheers, Natalie. Bye.